Welcome in, everybody. It's me, Amy Phillips with Drama Darling, and
It's Melissa Reich, your Bish therapist. It's a collab,
it's
y'all.
a collab. We are doing it. This is
Woo!
so exciting, Melissa Reich. Obviously, if you're listening to both of our podcasts, we're posting this on both of our feeds. So, hello to all the Bish therapists out there who listen. What do you call your Bish therapist listeners? Anything in particular?
I mean, I don't know that we've come up with a name, but I'm pretty sure the default is just Bishes. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, hello, Bishes.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy this podcast. And if you do, then please come on over and subscribe, follow me over at Drama Darling, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can always subscribe to my Patreon, and those are ad-free. Also, I'd like to make a note that, guys, if you're listening to this, I figured out my ad situation. So there won't be as many ads, programmatic ads in my episodes.
Yes.
That was a little confusing. I didn't know there were so many. I did not do that, but I was alerted. And so now it's not going to be as intense anymore. So anyway, and those of you who, my darlings, you know who your Bish therapist is because we talk about her all the time. She's been on my show several times. And obviously she has her own podcast. So please subscribe and follow her as well. Podcasts available anywhere you get your podcasts.
Yes, thank you. And Amy, I will tail off of what you just said, which is that same goes for me. There were millions of ads. Amy, my fairy godmother, helped bring it to my attention. It was not us. It was not a choice that we made, but we have remedied that situation. Yeah. So I just wanted to let my peeps know too, because I went from having like 2 ads to 200.
Yeah. And, so sorry about that. We did not know. Sometimes these things happen in the podcast world. And, but look,
That's right.
We figured it out. So, you're probably wondering what we're doing today, and that is because it is very important for us to wrap up the season of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which everyone has consumed. And I think, Melissa, you and I might be the last 2 people on earth to finally talk about, the end of it, because the way that we've been doing it, unlike probably other podcasts, and that's why I'd like to say our podcasts are fantastic because we take our time with the content.
Yeah.
We didn't just do the entire season. We broke it down. Okay.
Right.
Melissa broke it down on her podcast. I broke it down on mine. So today we meet at the end in the last 2 episodes. So we will be recapping episodes 7 and 8 together.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And what a doozy they were. Amy, what a doozy they were.
Indeed. I'm going to welcome you in. That's actually them being welcomed in when they got their laughing gas. I mean, they got some work done, but they got their laughing gas and they got welcomed in. So there you have it.
I love that. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for welcoming me in. Where is my laughing gas, I ask you? Where is it? I know.
Where
did it get through life?
I know.
So where is it?
You know what? You don't need laughing gas with us. You're going to get a lot of laughs today. Wow.
Good point.
Okay, so the way we're probably going to do this, we're going to figure it out as we go along. But what's going to be really fascinating, especially to me, is that Melissa is a therapist. And so her angle is going to be very different than the way that I've been recapping it. So it's going to be really interesting to hear her takes and her insight on a lot of these people. So we will kind of dive through. I think we'll certainly be able to get into the nuts and bolts of each individual relationship as we get there. And I'm fine to zig and zag wherever we go, Melissa.
Well, I'm zigging your zag, girl. So let's hit it. We're in it together.
Well, let's zig on over to the Chippendales. And this is episode 7. And Jen and Taylor, they leave Chippendales. They go back to that house, and because Zach and Dakota are mad. And then Demi is, and I know you'll probably speak to this, which is that she is such a great voice and someone who articulates so well what is happening in the scenes, as well as, I would say, Macy. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But Demi, in her confessional, says this is an example of the misogyny going on in the Mormon church. and like this needs to essentially stop because they're doing whatever they want, and like Zach is out gambling, but it's not okay for Jen to be there. Dakota's upset. So we finish up everything at the Chippendales. Layla gets pulled on stage, blah, 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 blah. And Dakota is just spiraling and is on the phone being like, I'm just imagining a Chippendale dancing on Taylor while she's 38 weeks pregnant with my kid. First of all, I hate it when people like say kid. It's just such a weird phrase to me. I don't know why. It's just odd.
Well, Amy, can I also point out he said my kid?
Oh,
my.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm focusing on kid when he said my. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm like, bro, this is not like, it just is indicative of Dakota's sense of ownership over human beings. I really have, my listeners know, and now your listeners will get to hear that I have very serious problems with Dakota and Zach. And I am happy to discuss it with my whole chest because yes, I mean, listen, I think the word kid too, it feels very detached.
Yeah, and that's what it is. Thank you for, see, these are the things that I learned from you. I don't know what it means. It just doesn't hit right. Oh, that's so perfect. Okay.
Yeah, but listen, and everyone listening to this knows if there's something like that that's not hitting right, you're on to something. I'm just able to put words to it because I have professionally roasted men like this my entire career. And so I think, the choice of my baby, it's not your baby, was odd. And just the whole process of them going to Vegas was just, I guess I would throw a title on it of coercive control. That's kind of what I've been calling it. And, so Zach had to, or I'm sorry, I get them so confused. Dakota had to apologize to Taylor so that he could still come on the trip, so that he could police her, and so that he could, have his temper tantrum about my pregnant girlfriend shouldn't be having the time of her life at Chippendales. That goes against my tiny little king baby ego.
Do you think that these ladies should have told whomever that they were going backstage at Chippendales and meeting them? Does that make any difference in the real world in terms of being honest? Okay.
Of course. So I think that one thing that I said is that Jessie, who kind of planned all of this, she has said in this episode that she had an ex-husband who was similar to Zach and to Dakota. And so what frustrates me about that is if you know then how irrational these men can be due to their own stuff, I think not letting the ladies know and taking away their informed consent for me in the real world was problematic, right? Because Jen may have made the decision to not attend. And so I think that Jessie, even though maybe she was married to somebody who was like Zach, she clearly has forgotten what it is it's not just about going and doing something fun when you have a husband like that. It's about so much more. And so I do think that was a little bit of a setup for everyone involved, truly.
Yeah, I do think that's messy. And not for nothing. And by the way, I do feel like there are plenty of people out there who practice the Mormon religion that live perfectly healthy, happy lives. And so I'm not coming down on that, but I do feel like not even in the Mormon religion, but in any kind of relationship or marriage, if there is some sort of weird trust issue, or perhaps there's a history of cheating, or I don't know, or maybe somebody's just not comfortable with or doesn't understand the Chippendale show, where like for women, it's just a little bit different. It's not as sexualized for us. It's just kind of stupid. Whereas when a man typically goes to a strip club, it can mean something different. It can have different varying results, if you will. So in many ways, I think that these guys in this case are equating it to what it would be like for them in a strip club, and they don't understand. They're naive. They don't get it, and so in many ways, I do feel like, Jesse set them up and didn't allow them to respect whatever communication they have going on in their marriages and put them in that situation. And a lot of people who aren't Mormons would be uncomfortable backstage at Chippendale. I mean, it doesn't have to
Not
be
me.
because of that.
I'll go. I'll go to Vegas right now. Sign me up. And you know what? My husband would give me ones on ones on ones if I were going to Chippendales or a strip club, because to your point, men who are secure with themselves aren't threatened by that. And,
That's exactly
and you're
right.
It goes above and beyond Mormonism. There are men like this in every race, religion, ethnicity, every creed has men who I think, listen, Amy, I think you're being very kind in how you're talking about them. I think you're giving them too much credit. I think even if they knew about it, they would still have thrown a similar tantrum, because it really is about, in my opinion, it's about that ownership of these women. It's about that patriarchal, do as I say, not as I do, because we see, right, so Jen is hysterical in this Chippendales, and what is Zach doing? Oh, that's right, he's gambling, which is literally against their religion, number one. And number two, that money was brought to you by Mom Talk.
Yeah.
So
brought to you by.
It's just wild. It's wild.
They're so young, and it's really difficult to separate the kind of twisted thinking and then their youth and naivete. To me, that combination is so disastrous, because I look at this and I'm like, okay, well, if I was in a young relationship and my boyfriend, and I'm just going to say boyfriend because I, wouldn't be married at 20, is going to a strip club, I'd be like, no, because I'd be so naive. I wouldn't understand. I would feel threatened. I would feel jealous, and I wouldn't get it. So I wouldn't have the emotional maturity that I was able to garner later on in my life to be able to understand that's really not a big deal in certain situations. And my husband would feel the same way. So in many ways, when I look at this, I'm like, oh my God, these guys are they're all over the place between what they believe and then their young brains not being mature at all. It's an absolute nightmare. Now,
and Amy, can I interrupt for a second? Because to your point, Demi said, is it Demi or Demi?
Demi.
Okay, Demi. Sorry. I've been calling her Demi. My bad.
That's okay. Everybody. Yeah. Well, because we always call Demi Moore and stuff, but it really is Demi. Yeah.
Demi. Okay. So she made a really, really excellent point. And to speak to what you said before, I think Demi and Macy are two of the most emotionally intelligent women who I may have ever seen on television.
I agree. I can't believe it. And I have to give the Mormon religion credit for that. I mean, as much as maybe we don't want to do that, how were they raised? What were they doing before this point? They are evolved. They are emotionally mature. Their experiences and what they experienced growing up, and that learned behavior, the seeking, the trying to figure out what you're doing wrong, all that stuff. I feel like then their evolution into a bigger understanding and a greater understanding has made them these incredibly intuitive, emotionally intelligent women, which is amazing.
It is. And it just goes to show that, what I've been talking about on my podcast is how it's really about, with everybody, how do you apply this religion that you're learning, that you're absorbing? How are we applying it as human beings? And I think that Demi and Macy are good examples of how you live your religion day to day, how you are a good citizen, how you're a good person, how you speak to people with respect and kindness, how you validate them and hear them, but also call them on their stuff. I stand them. I do. I really don't stand a lot of people. I swear to you, I stand them. Number one. And number two, Demi said something really important based on what you just said about how all of these women in Mormonism are getting married before their brains even develop.
Right.
And she is so right, because one thing I think it's important to point out is that the last parts of our brain to develop are the prefrontal cortexes. And what do the prefrontal cortexes do? They manage impulse control. And so when people do not have that fully developed, it does develop at age 25. That is when it's done developing. And so Demi is right that Zach and Jen met when she was 20. So people look at 20-year-olds or 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and they think you're an adult. Well, they are not in any way, shape, or form. They're basically bigger children, if I'm being honest. And so I think I just love that not only did Demi point that out, but she's 1,000% correct about that. 1,000%.
What a difference several years can make. Because Macy, well, Demi is older than Jen. Jen is probably the youngest, right? I believe.
I believe that Jen is the youngest, yes.
And so she's
Layla's the youngest.
Oh, okay. And she's already been divorced, which she's starting her whole new life, which is great. It's nice to see her already in that transition, which is wonderful to see. Now, when Demi said to Jen that Zach is threatening your marriage after you've had 2 of his kids, done nothing but support him, paid for his medical school, that's gross. And she continues they keep trying to confront Jen and tell her how messed up this is up until the very last episode, to the point where I felt so bad for Jen because Jessie was kind of piling on. She's like, he treats you like shit, I'll never be in the same room with him. And then Demi's like, you don't see it, you're not seeing it. And she just crumbles and is like, you guys, this is really hard for me right now, and just starts crying. And I had so much compassion for her because she's doing the best she can. And man, oh man, oh man, oh man. And she is in such a pickle. And now with this situation where I would like to talk to you about the Jen and Zach conversation about New York, and how she was like, I would like to put that on pause because I feel like there are opportunities with mom talk. And he's like, I don't really care. And then the last scene, of course, is that we see them in New York and they're going to move there. Yep. And Jen is not going to be part of mom talk. Naturally. And so where do we see Jen? Because it seems like she, on some level, understands what people are saying. She's not, when she gave not the excuse, I'm not going to say excuse, because when she explained this, it did make a lot of sense. After she left, that night, and then she left that party, the baby mama party, all this stuff, they're seeing her like kowtow to Zach. Well, one of the things when she left Vegas in the middle of the night to go be with him because it was just such a mess, the next day she said, let me explain what happened. And she was like, oh, it was great. We really had this great conversation. It was like really a breakthrough. And I was like, oh, this is the same old thing. Like, I've been there. This is just bullshit. It's just so. But what I thought was interesting, and tell me if you think this is right, but when she said, I haven't been the person that he met. Like, I've changed. I've evolved. I'm not saying yes to everything. I'm fighting him on things. I'm the one paying the bills. I have been inserting myself with a lot more control than he's used to. And now he's not used to that. This is pushing all of his buttons. And so he's freaking out. And that's why this is all happening. And that made sense to me. But please take it from there, Melissa Reich, therapist.
Please let me take it from here, because holy Moses.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing that Jen said, I have these quotes and then I filled in my clinical interpretations in there. So she says, yes, these are her words, he has these narcissistic traits about him that come out in situations like this every few months. But who's to say in another marriage this would be different?
Oh my God, that's right.
Let me break this down for you. Okay. So she's saying, yes, he has these narcissistic traits about him that come out in situations like this. And I put in parentheses, me disobeying him. That's it. She disobeys and he flips, right? And then she said it happens every few months. And I'm going to shout it from the rooftops. This is called the cycle of abuse.
Yes.
It is a cycle, an endless cycle of bad behavior followed by some BS repair. And I say BS because if they really repaired the situation, then the pattern wouldn't keep happening. Right? If he was really sorry and if they were really able to repair.
Right.
So what she thinks is repairing the relationship is really just patronizing him and giving into him so that she doesn't have to endure his outbursts. And then let me say the last part is she said, who's to say in another marriage this would be different? And so what this is
him telling her, try to go find another Mormon husband. They'll be just like me.
Well, but it's also textbook rationalization that allows the victim to stay in situations. And so what I talked about on my podcast is that
no, it's so, I'm sorry to cut you. The rationalization is out of control.
And so when she says to the group, like, yeah, everything is fine, we needed that, and everyone's jaws dropped on the floor, mine included, what that told me is so many things. That told me that this happens constantly.
Yeah.
This pattern happens constantly. It's happened consistently. And if he is willing to do this on TV, what is he willing to do when he's not being filmed or recorded is what I want to know.
Yeah.
And one important thing that I want to say, because I have a lot of, and I know you do too, we have a lot of survivors and thrivers that listen to our podcast. And so there are many reasons why women stay. Many, many, many. I don't want this to induce shame, right? Because Jen has to make her realizations in her own time. She is, I believe, in an abusive situation based on everything we're seeing, based on what she's saying, based on what her friends are saying. And so this is textbook cycle of abuse, but Jen isn't ready. And I have a ton of empathy for that. I've had the honor of working with domestic violence survivors. And one thing they all have in common is this desperate need and they deserve to be loved.
And not to say that he's abusing her physically, because that's not what we've seen or heard or anything that's assumed. So, but any person who looks like they're being I would say in this situation, emotionally abused that we can see?
Verbally, mentally, emotionally, all three for sure. You're right. And thank you for pointing that out. I am not saying anything about physical because that's not my purview. It hasn't been talked about. But what we watched, make no mistake, is verbal, mental, and emotional abuse. And I believe that I believe that she believes she has made multiple claims about, I have it written here. When I find it, I'll tell you exactly. But she made comments about, well, I thought that if I just loved him enough, I would give him the opportunity to grow or to get better or to improve. And so Jen, the problem is she does what a lot of young women do, which is they think, well, this is a me problem, right? I'm not being a good enough wife. I'm not being subservient enough. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. But the fact of the matter is Zach is who he is. And it doesn't matter. If Jen was the perfect Mormon wife, he would still find excuses to act out because that's a personality issue, not a Jen issue.
Now, I was really surprised that in that conversation that they had, she said to him, and I think you might have been alluding to this, I see your potential. Yes, and that was so demeaning to him that I loved it because he was like, squeeze me now? I was like, yes. So, and then in that same conversation, which I think they were just doing it for the show, because I can't imagine she would be this brave to say this on television, but she did, which is that she said, if we don't take a break, I don't know if our marriage will survive this. And for that to come out of her mouth is a very big deal, considering that that would be her putting her boundaries up and saying, like, if you don't change, ultimately giving him an ultimatum. If you don't change, if you don't give our relationship space to grow, and if you don't change and live up to your potential and what I see for you, then I'm going to have to leave. Now, in the meantime,
I don't think she meant that. She didn't mean it. I think she was putting on a show for the cameras, because when it goes back to domestic violence, no woman grows up saying, I'm going to be a victim of domestic violence. I'm going to marry a narcissist. I'm going to be abused, right? And so these women, they're like, well, this isn't me. I'm not an abused spouse. And so I'm going to lay these ground rules and these, hard messages. But did you see Zach's face when she did that? He looked like he wanted to. He looked really angry. Let me just say that.
And
then look what ended up happening.
When you say domestic abuse, you don't mean physical necessarily.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Because let me be clear, domestic abuse involves any sort of abuse, physical, emotional, mental, all of that.
Okay.
So yes, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, he looked pissed to high heaven. I mean, and then part of me thinks that she said that to him in a way that was like, they had a conversation off camera where she said, I'm going to say some things to you on camera that I don't mean. Like she negotiated with him to save face with the audience.
Right. That's what I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But again, no woman wants to believe that they are experiencing this pain because this is the person who she loves, right? And so what's happening is and that's the most important thing, right? I believe if they did not have children, and by the way, they're young kids, they're young. And so that's, to my point earlier, is that there are millions of reasons why women don't leave. Primarily kids, pets, financial stuff. Like, could she afford to live with, all of these different things? But also, let's not forget, in Mormonism, probably the biggest factor is shame, right? Shame about, they are very traditional Mormon. They have traditional Mormon values. And so this would have a lot of stigma to it, right? There would be a lot of stigma attached to walking away from her marriage. And walking away from your marriage then also means, what did Zach do about all the women? He dragged them because she's divorced. She's married to an old guy, right? But I believe this is what people in Utah do. And Jen doesn't want to be talked about in that. So I have a lot of empathy for her because I feel like she feels like she's stuck between a rock and a hard place. And she probably is.
Oh, she is. I felt so bad for her. She's doing the best she can. And I'm surprised at how she actually has been very outspoken with people on the show before even we had that conversation with Zach, in the earlier episodes when she would tell, like, Jesse, ever since I started making money, I'm not putting up with the stuff that I used to. So it's been impressive to see a little bit of her evolution and for her to share that with us. And now she's just in a situation where the stakes are so high. They're in the middle of a huge transition in their lives where he's studying to be a doctor. I mean, like, that's a really big deal, obviously. And I can understand him completely, demeaning mom talk when you put medical school and mom talk next to each other. Medical school is going to win, and that's probably why she agreed to move. Right?
But here's my question, Amy. No, here's my question. Who's supporting them then? Who is supporting them? This is how you know it's a personality issue with Zach, because it's not even practical.
Right.
If you're going to move to New York and you're going to be in grad school, how are you making money? Where is money coming in?
Yeah.
And so, but guess what? This is what men like him do. It is steps of isolation, steps of taking away independence.
Oh, wow.
Trust me,
yes.
I have seen this thousands of times before.
I've lived it. Yeah.
Okay,
I know exactly what you're talking about. I didn't even think about that. It is. I mean, they're on an island.
Oh, yeah. They're literally on an island, away from mom talk, away from any of her friends or family, by the way. And number two, the fact that Zach is going to be a doctor is just hilarious to me because I have a lot of medical trauma. And if I saw him as a doctor, how do you think he's going to treat his female patients, by the way?
Absolutely. I mean,
right?
Absolutely. Right? He's not going to listen to them. He's not going to believe them. He's going to be completely misogynistic. He'll be the worst doctor.
Well, I hope when he gets his license, I'll go see him and I'll make him brand new. I'll make him brand new and I will teach him what it is to listen to women. But anyway, I digress.
Melissa's going to teach him a thing or two.
I'm going to teach him, honey.
Do you know where they stand to this day? Are they like, they're still together and in New York and he's in medical school? Is that what's happening? Do you know?
So from what I understand, yes, that they are in New York. He is still in medical school. She is not coming back to season 2 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. However, I did have to note that at first it looked like Whitney wasn't going to come back. And now, of course, Whitney is coming back.
She is coming back? I didn't see that news. Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
Okay.
She released a reel.
I'm glad.
A reel of her and Connor where she was like on this old flip phone and it was like Whitney added back to the group. And I'm thinking after the season finale, which I know we'll talk about, like how, but whatever. My point is that Whitney's need for attention is greater than anything else on the planet. So there she'll be.
Good, because they need a villain. I mean, you do need to have some sort of villain. You need to have that push and pull. And she's such a fascinating, delusional person that you just love to hate. So why don't we move on and talk about Whitney before we get into the Taylor stuff? So Whitney has isolated herself because she feels holier than thou and better than everybody. And essentially she the biggest thing is that she doesn't go to Macy's, her best friend, apparently her baby mama launch party, and also is nowhere to be found. And then it ultimately turns up at Michaela's birthday and they're not even friends. And she walks in like the cat who ate the canary and pulls Macy aside. And they have a conversation in which Macy was great. She just perfectly articulated everything she needed to from an emotional standpoint by saying, like, you're still in the doghouse, but thank you for the apology, essentially. And Whitney is just the constant victim. Is that right? Melissa, please give me your take on Whitney.
Oh, boy. I have a lot of takes on Whitney. Again, I'm happy to shout them from the rooftops. I call her Whitney Avoidance Levitt. Oh. Her middle name should be Avoidance because her whole life from start to finish of this series has been avoiding. It was first she went to Hawaii to avoid the she claimed it was mom talk that she was avoiding, but it was really the rumors about Connor. Okay. Then she doesn't go to anything. She leaves the group chat whenever things. Whitney is a perpetual victim. Yeah. Perpetual. She is a perpetual gaslighter. She is unable to take any sort of ownership or accountability over anything. I believe she sees all of her relationships as completely transactional. And I could write a dissertation on
even though she's projecting that on other people, saying we wouldn't really be friends if we didn't have to do a video together. So she's projecting that transactional thing on other people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing. She's like, she does all these things. She projects. She doesn't even do it cleverly, though. It's not even like it's so easy to see. Right. And I think that she just like has this desperate need for attention. And some folks who don't get the love and support that they need growing up, they will take attention any way that they can get it, whether it's good or bad attention. And usually you see that in children and adolescents, but you certainly can see that in adults. I think Whitney is extremely emotionally immature. And one thing I wanted to say that I thought was kind of funny is she talked about homesteading, and one of the producers called her out about the isolation of that. And I'm like, yes, thank you, producers, because homesteading is fancy and sustainable isolation. It's eco-friendly isolation.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So I'm
I did
happy to
not
break
hear the
down.
producer say that. I didn't hear the producer ask that question. I completely missed that. That's really great.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was impressed with that because I'm like, oh, good. These producers are sick of her shit too.
Well, yeah, and especially in light of all the trad wives situation, out there with Ballerina Farm and Nara, all of these Mormon influencers. I do
Right.
want to break that down, and I also want to say, um, Connor spilling the Las Vegas tea to Whitney was witnessing the greatest moment of his life. Um,
For sure. He's like, the heat's not on me anymore. Yeah.
and that was like that to me in the background, hanging there with Whitney, is like the wildest thing to watch because she's not going to do anything about it. They're just not going to do anything about it. They're just going to move on and not.
And have another baby. I
Yeah.
mean, here's the thing, Amy. These relationships, to make a relationship work when you have partners like this, it requires a lot of ignoring, a lot of avoiding, a lot of stuffing, a lot of pretending. And listen, I don't begrudge anyone the chance to have, their children and their family. But in my opinion, some of these women will do so at the cost of their own happiness. And they just don't even seem to think twice about it because I think that this is what's modeled sometimes in the Mormon religion. It's not about being happy, it's just about staying married. And it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's slavery. That's not
Mm-hmm.
that's not what marriage is. So
Mm-hmm.
I think some of it is symptomatic or
Yeah.
problematic of, some
That's
of
just
those
what you
tenets.
do. It's what you do. And then, perhaps that really feeds into her behavior of why she's acting the way that she's acting because of everything that's going on here. And
Mhm.
I mean, we saw how her mom didn't give her the sex talk, but I also didn't really have much of a sex talk either. But the point being is that her mom was avoiding that, obviously. I'm sure my mom was too on some level, but like, you know what I mean? But those are patterns of avoidance that you've seen, and then you're emulating them on some
Correct.
level.
Correct.
Mhm.
Whitney's mom, Amy, I want to say this really quick. Whitney's mom made a quote that I wanted to point out. She made some comment about you have to be careful about too much
Mm.
temptation or about having too much pleasure. And so what I think is interesting is that Whitney's family, I'm assuming like many Mormons, there's this generational trauma of avoidance passed down from generation to generation because avoiding temptations is not the way to learn how to manage them, right? It's a great way to learn how to have problematic skills.
Mhm.
So my point is that Whitney wasn't taught to face things and address them and deal with them. It's in her family, it seems the Mormon way is to just have another baby, pretend it doesn't exist, don't get too. Whitney did the same thing that Jen did with Zach. She did the same thing with Connor. It was just like, well, ladies, here it is. This is the situation, but we're moving forward and I
Mm.
trust him. And then it's just like, you never heard of it again. So to me, I'm seeing patterns in these women's relationships.
Mm.
And that's
And
all
they
I wanted
wouldn't
to mention.
be, that's such a great point. And we wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it wouldn't stick out if the other women weren't all, like, some of the other women are seeing it for what it is. So they're able to
Right.
call it out, but it wouldn't be called out because that's just how they live, you know? And when I
Right.
say they,
Right.
I also don't even mean like just the Mormon community, any dysfunctional relationship in any religion, everywhere. But because we're talking about this show and these
Mm-hmm.
patterns, that's why we're leaning into that. But yeah. And so Whitney being the constant victim, she's like, they don't check on me. She's talking to Connor while she's like hammering together something to make it look like she's a homesteader. She's like hammering together a
Right.
ladder or some bullshit. And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, they don't call me or check on me. I love what Mom Talk stands for. And I feel like I have so much, like I give so much to this platform and I can continue to do that, but I just don't want to do it with this group of women. She said group of women, which I don't.
Danielle Staub.
It's exactly what I thought. They don't know what the plural of. Thank you for knowing that. Thank you for knowing that.
Oh
So,
my God, that's amazing.
now the other thing is, I just want to quickly mention that Macy went. I'm just going back to Vegas real quick. When Jen left that night at like 2 a.m, I was kind of going through it in my head. I'm like, well, she must have had some sort of producer help her get from A to B. You know what I mean? Like, because, and if she hadn't, someone leaving a place at 2 a.m. in Las Vegas and then you not hearing from them for that long is
Dangerous.
It's terrifying. And when Macy said, like, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, Macy said anything is possible. Like, I watch a lot of true crime. And that freaked me the hell out.
And I thought to myself, it's not just that Macy watches a lot of true crime, because don't all white women of our age love true crime, if I'm being like, right? That's such a thing. Yeah. But the problem, you know what, Amy, I just lost my train of thought.
Oh, no problem. Well, when she said anything is possible, about her getting...
So I think what that means is that she knows them, right? And so it's not just that she loves true crime. She knows them. And if someone who knows you thinks for one possible second that you could have been some sort of a victim of something, that is really concerning to me behind the scenes. Because Macy does have her finger on the pulse. She does understand, in my opinion, the way things work. So for me, I'm like, well, if she's worrying about this, that is a huge red flag for me. I know. Huge.
When they're in Vegas and it's like the morning after the Chippendales, right? And Dakota calls Taylor and he's on speakerphone and he's like, oh yeah, Zach gambled until 1:30 and the jaws on those ladies dropped to the floor because that was some tea. And because Taylor goes, oh, and he goes, what, am I not supposed to say that? Because I wonder if he really, that did seem like he kind of bamboozled himself there. And then Taylor goes on to say, well, yeah, she left at like 2 a.m. because like we ended up meeting the Chippendales. And he's like, wait, you met them? Why didn't you tell me that last night? And she's like, I'm telling you now. Because I'm telling you now. I loved it so much because I'm telling you now.
Taylor.
She's amazing.
I know. The difference in response of Jen versus Taylor is literally everything. Because it's like similar behaviors from Zach and Dakota, right? Similar processes under these behaviors. But while Jen is terrified and trying to convince him to love her, Taylor's like, not me. Ain't gonna do it. No, ma'am. And I was like, that's right, Taylor.
She's lived it. She sees it, and she's not gonna do it. She's not gonna do it. So they're obviously off to a bad start. Then Dakota comes to the house and apologizes to her. Okay. So now we have the whole Jenna situation and Macy getting that message. And now Dakota is a mess crying in this bed. I'm sorry, not Dakota. Taylor is a mess crying in this bed. And he apologized for overreacting the night before. She's like, we're 17 days away from having our baby and we're so bad. And he says, you changed who you were. Now, talk about gaslighting.
Boom.
When you changed who you were when we met. And she essentially, I'm just paraphrasing, and she says, no, let me rephrase that because you're not going to gaslight me. The guard went up because of the lies. Oh, that's an interesting and a different story, Dakota. So now I also don't let Taylor walk away unscathed in all of this, by the way, and I'm sure you don't either, but I'd rather kind of focus on the Jenna thing for right now because Macy decides to tell Taylor this. Instead of telling her postpartum about the message about this person, she decides to tell her 17 days before the baby is born. Now, I want to ask you, I'd like to break this down in a couple different ways. One, do you think it was the right thing to do that Macy bring this information to her 17 days before she's going to have a baby?
Yes. And here's why. I believe that whatever's happening, Macy knows Taylor, right? They're friends, and she knows, just like my close friends, I would know what they would want me to do in that same scenario, right? And it seems like Macy knows Taylor well enough. And Taylor, by the way she responded, in my opinion, it did give her time at least to process it and think about it. Because could you imagine, so I've never had kids, Amy, you have, but could you imagine being postpartum, exhausted, sleep deprived, and then being told this information? She wouldn't have been able to process it appropriately, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think it was absolutely appropriate for her to share that and not keep the secret anymore. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Now, if I could just jump to the very end, which is obviously the cliffhanger for next season, which is that Macy calls Jenna on the phone, who she is assuming that this message is referring to, that Dakota slept with Jenna. And so she calls Jenna on the phone, and we get, Jenna saying, "I'll tell you everything you want to know." So, and at that point, for me, after she's already spoken with Dakota, she's already spoken with Taylor, it is what it is. Now she's literally going to have this baby. Personally, I don't think she should be talking to Jenna at this point, and I don't think she should dig any further. I think she should leave it alone, because they just need to survive and get this baby fed and changed and loved and focused on that. And so I feel that Macy's choice at the end here, to me, seems reckless, and I don't agree with it. I do agree with her telling her right away, but what do you think about this cliffhanger?
I fully agree with you, Amy. I think that, one of the terms that I've been using on social media is about a drama triangle. And, there's this drama triangle by Cartman. And so I've been talking a lot about it. But I believe that by doing what Macy did, she is triangulating herself into Dakota and Taylor's drama triangle. She is putting herself right up in there. And I understand why, but I do agree that she doesn't understand what she's doing. It's probably great for the show. It's not great. Like, why does she even want to take that on, right? Because think then, if she gets the information, then she has to hold on to that, right? That's a lot for her to carry. And it's like, it's Taylor's responsibility. If she wants to talk to Jenna, she should do that. So I agree. I think Macy definitely overstepped and put herself into the drama triangle. Yep.
Okay, thanks for confirming that. And also, she's doing it on camera, which is very... It's messy.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like
it's messy.
It's a thirsty way to do it in an odd way, and it just feels a little too reality television there. But and I shouldn't expect anything less. But I was disappointed in Macy seeing the very end of this. So now, as they move on from, Dakota leaves that day from the house, and then I want to get into how, we already talked about that. Okay, so then.
Can I say one thing about Dakota?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes, of course, please.
Because I just need to point this out. So if you're giving an apology to somebody and then 2 minutes after that apology, you try to blame them for being a different person, you were never sorry in the first place. So Dakota, it's about appeasing Taylor. And why they're in this toxic merry-go-round is because he keeps doing the same thing, and he wants ownership. In my opinion, he wants ownership over Taylor. He's saying, I want you to surrender to me. He said that to Taylor. So that tells me he wants ownership. He talks about my baby. He talks about my girlfriend, at Chippendales. So not only do I believe he wants ownership, I also believe that he's not sorry at all. Because that when you apologize, it should be for you, and that's it, and not dependent upon what the other person does or doesn't do. And so for him to then immediately go to gaslighting her about how, which is what it is, how you're different, that immediately takes steps back from the accountability that he just took. So I want to be clear about something. People who have narcissistic traits and tendencies, they can appear to take accountability, but then their behaviors tell that they don't really mean it.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words, and narcissists have a great way with words.
Great.
And
Excellent.
Then they never
some
back
of them
them
do.
up.
Some of them don't.
Oh, and some of, yeah, there you go. I should correct myself. Some of the ones that I've known can, throw themselves on the ground and be as sorry as possible, but then do the same thing the next day. And it's like,
right.
It's just a bunch of bullshit. Now,
This is
where I have like several questions for you. So bear with me now. So Dakota, when he's shown this confession that is supposedly from Jenna, to Macy's, whatever, he's like, that's so dumb. Now, everything that he says from here on out, from this scene with Taylor and the scene in the car with Macy, which was intense, is him lying. I mean, it's just him straight up lying, and you can see it plain as day. And Taylor is saying to him and essentially threatening him, and I understand, if this did go down, I will find out. And then he projects onto her and says, vice versa. I'm sick of hearing the same thing over and over again. And I never hear I'm sticking around. Okay, so he's flipping it. Now, she says, that if things come out, I'm going to end things with you. So here's where I am looking at this and I'm going, is Taylor putting and also put Dakota in an impossible situation? And let me explain this, okay? One, did she put him in an impossible situation when we found out, not from her mouth, but from his, that she said, you can go and do whatever you want with whomever you want, just don't tell me. And then the night that he did that, he didn't tell her because she told him not to. And so he lied to her. But now she's saying, you cannot lie to me. And how dare you lie to my face and then go be with someone? Well, what does she expect him to do? Because she doesn't want to know, how is he not supposed to lie? So that to me is very confusing. She almost set him up for disaster. So in some ways, she's trying to self-sabotage this, which, by the way, at one other point, somebody said, and maybe it was Zach, or it was Dakota, but one of them said, you're self-sabotaging me, when it was like...
Dakota said that.
Oh, Dakota said that to Macy, right?
He said that to Macy.
You're self-sabotaging me. I'm sorry. Can you take the self out of it? You're such a narcissist.
That makes
you can't
no
even...
sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense. So Taylor almost is saying, go do what you want. Like it's an open relationship. Right? And then they were just talking during. So this is where I can't leave Taylor off the hook, because now she's pregnant. They're 17 days away and she's going, if I find out, we're done. And she's carrying his baby. So he literally has nowhere to go other than to say to her, no, of course I didn't do it. Because what are you going to do at that point? You want to see you're not going to be able to see your baby when it's born. I mean, I hear me out, darlings and bishes, okay? Please do not think that I'm on Dakota's side at all. I just think this is a very complicated situation. And if I'm ever able to justify someone just lying until the baby is born, I suppose sometimes to protect people, maybe you need to do that. I don't know what the right answer is, but it doesn't seem like any of this is right. It doesn't seem right.
I agree. And listen, those are valid points. The one thing I can say for Taylor is she admitted, and I wrote this in all caps, she admitted that she's miserable and she admits she self-created it. And that is one of the things that I love about Taylor, is because she can say, here's how I've participated in my own demise. So I don't know what specifically she knows that she's done, but you have a valid point here. My interpretation of this was that, yeah, she said those things to Dakota, but when she asks him, he lies to her. So it's the lie that's the problem. It's the lie that tells her, well, I can't trust you because you said no, and now we're seeing these things.
But
and
she told him not to tell her about being with other people. So I guess I don't understand how he's supposed to tell her when she told him not to tell her.
Well, and in fairness, listen, I don't remember hearing that part where she said, but I know that you're telling the truth, is that I don't remember her saying, don't tell me about it. But I think, listen, and you're right, she gives him mixed messages, because my theory about Taylor, and I've gotten a lot of feedback about this from other folks, is that her mom and dad are so awful to her that I believe that she was never given the unconditional love and support that she desperately needed. And so now she's looking for it in a partner. And unfortunately, the only two people on this planet who are supposed to give us unconditional love and support are our parents. And so when we don't get that from our parents, then we look for it in other people who it's not appropriate to give that to us. Dakota, for all intents and purposes, he's not supposed to give her unconditional love. There are conditions on romantic relationships. And of course, Taylor plays a role in this dysfunctional relationship, because while she's saying to him, I'll leave you, guess what she's not doing? She's not leaving him, right? She's saying that she's going to leave him. She's talking a big game. She's acting like she's really tough. But then when it comes down to it, she's not making any changes. So she looks stronger and tougher than Jen. But in my opinion, they're both doing very similar things.
Yes, but he hasn't actually told her the truth. So she's living in this world of
ambiguity.
Right. Yeah. So she can't leave. I mean, if she's going to believe him. But deep down, she knows. She has to know. I mean, he's lying. You're watching this. I don't even know Dakota. And he's lying. I can see the lies all over his face. And he pretty much said to Macy, like, I couldn't believe how transparent he was being. And she didn't actually, I mean, I don't blame her for not picking up on this. But in the car, when they were having that very strange drive for 15 minutes, I was so uncomfortable, by the way, them being in a car together. Same. Like, why didn't they just get out of the car and talk on a park bench? That was so fucking weird.
It was so weird. And also, I did feel concerned for Macy, because Dakota is very unpredictable. And I knew that he was emotionally dysregulated. And so I just did worry about that. But listen, it worked out fine, but you're right. There were a million things in that conversation to me that were red flags. Yeah, a million.
So she's explained to him, I chose to tell her now instead of postpartum. I thought that was great. That's great, right? And and she's like, because I think that would be better. And he said, but is that better? Meaning, like, could you not have done this? Could you just have waited? Because is it really better to do that right now? I'm trying to have a baby here with this woman, and she's a mess. Please let me try to handle this, and we'll deal with all that later. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel like he's doing it. He's sweeping it aside and going, yeah, there's a shit pile here, and I know I'm going to have to clean it up, but I don't want to deal with it until this baby's out. You know, that's how I see him. And
I have a very different take on that.
Oh, tell me. Okay.
Because so yes, I see what you're saying, but then he tells Macy, he said, the issues that we're having in this relationship are due to you. You are sabotaging us. And his life, here's the thing. This is exactly what a controlling person would say. And his life would be easier if Macy was the problem. So what I'm saying is, in my perspective, which I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying I perceive him again to be talking some good talk, but then he goes to playing the blame game. And Macy even says to him, she says something about you want to blame me. And he says, I'm not looking for someone to blame. But then he says, you're the only one to blame.
Yes.
He literally said that.
Yeah, he literally said it.
Bro, get your story. Like, you can't even lie well.
Right. He is, it's almost like he thinks that the world should just stand still, ignore his own actions for the sake of what he wants to try to make it better for what he thinks is better for Taylor, which I don't know what's better for Taylor, quite frankly, at this point. All I know is that I keep hearing the word 17 days until I have this baby, and it's really stressing me out, So,
but here's what's wild. Dakota's telling Macy, you don't know what's best for her, but then he's trying to say, I know what's best for her. And guess what? No one knows what's best for Taylor except for Taylor. So can everyone just let that go for a minute? He just makes me so mad.
It's like he admitted he was lying in that car. He admitted he was lying, and then, like you said, blamed her for it, bringing up his lie, like bringing this all up. It just...
And then he's like, well, why don't you like me? And it's like, because here's the thing. Every single conversation he has, I believe, is a microcosm of the bigger issue in he and Taylor's relationship. Mm-hmm. Blame, no accountability, circular arguments, focusing on things that don't matter. So to me, he is a huge part of the problem, because you're not just seeing this with Taylor. Macy is a great communicator. And if you're seeing her have this weird conversation and feel so strange about it, it's a Dakota problem.
It's all
so he will get no, you are being very lovely and compassionate, but your bish doesn't have any for Dakota today. Mm-mm.
Oh, I don't have any compassion for Dakota. I just see it as a very difficult situation because Taylor's pregnant. And I think there's some level of concern for a baby here that I think he's maybe in his probably delusion. He's probably hiding it in this, actually, so forget my point. But that there's a baby here, and that please, let's not deal with all my shit until this baby is out, because I'm worried.
Right. And it's like, Dakota, that isn't how life works. There's not a perfect time to deal with things or to talk about things. And so back to the point about why Taylor needed to know this, there's never going to be a good time. 17 days before birth, postpartum, it's all hard. It's just hard in different ways.
Yeah.
And so I think that him trying to gatekeep the information that Taylor has and that Taylor doesn't have just really speaks.
Gatekeeping is, and I think I would love to know a little bit more of a tighter timeline on the conversation between, it's dawning on me right now that it's like she got pregnant when they came back together after this, after she knew about there might have been a situation with somebody, right? With this Jenna person. So he's had 9 months to tell her the truth.
Correct. And has chosen not to at every single turn. In fact, it was one episode, I forget which one it was, where he was talking to her about this. It was when Macy was there. It was like a group therapy type of thing. And, because Macy does like to insert herself in their drama, but she was talking to him about, here was the problem, you lied. And then he grasped onto every single other straw just so that he didn't have to admit that he was dishonest, right? He could have squashed it then and there if he would have said, yes, you're right, I was dishonest, right?
Last season, that wasn't it last season, or was it beginning of this season?
I think it was like episode 5 or something.
Oh, right, because she was pregnant.
I forget.
Yeah, but that was a safe space for him to admit. He could have done it right then, and he could have done it so many times, but he didn't.
Or he could have just said, I know that you feel that I'm not being truthful. Tell me what I can do to repair this, because this is the truth for me. So, and I hear you don't believe me. And so how can we repair this? But he doesn't want to repair. He wants to blame and shame and
get away with it.
Yeah. And he just wants women to just be like, okay, this is fine. And it's like, well, it isn't. Sorry.
It's crazy that he thinks that, he could keep a secret like this, considering, it's just... Right. It's going to come out. It's come out. People know, and there will be some validation on it. So,
yeah, you're right.
Now, I lost my mind when Whitney pulled out a pea stick from the cake for the announcement. Isn't that just a perfect example of how delusional she is? I didn't really think about that.
It was the most perfect example of what on earth is wrong with this woman, that she legitimately thought it was appropriate to put a literal pea stick, a pregnancy test that she peed on, in a cake, and her response was, well, I covered it. She put the cover over it.
Yeah, and the plastic tip.
And I'm like, what is happening upstairs for you? Because
I mean, the sister was
wild.
like, who's younger than her, is like, yeah, no. By the way, what would that be called? Somebody who has no discernment. Like, she brought the Fruity Pebbles, she put the pea stick in there, she shows up, she has no discernment whatsoever. I don't know what it would be called. What is that?
Narcissism.
Oh, okay. Got it. Simple. Easy.
I'm pretty sure that's just what it is.
Stupidity meets narcissism, maybe? I don't know. Yeah.
I definitely think, in all seriousness, that Whitney is socially awkward and socially lacks some social skills. I would say that paired with some of those personality traits and tendencies. I also just think because she's another person, she's like Dakota in the way that she can't take accountability and own anything. So I feel like for her, when you're living in a brain of someone who's never wrong, like if you can never be wrong or hold yourself accountable, well, then how can you ever adjust your social skills and grow? Right? I mean, that just kind of makes logical sense. The whole point of personal growth is to say, okay, I made this mistake. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this different. But Whitney is incapable of that. So she just continues to do these strange things.
And not to mention, I mean, the biggest one, which was doing the TikTok dance in front of her baby that had RSV.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then
is admitting that narcissism?
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's that, but it's also a desperate need for attention, which, by the way, so narcissism, I could do a whole episode on this, but narcissism, there's a continuum, and not everyone has narcissistic traits and tendencies, right? But when it crosses the border into pathology, and there's some specific criteria for that. But one of those criteria is lack of empathy, of when you do something wrong and you upset someone, how do you, like Whitney doubles down on that instead of saying, oh, wow, okay, I understand how this could have hurt you. And so in her mind, she can't ever hold herself accountable for anything. And so it just leads her to kind of behave in this very odd, because if you look at it, it's like, it's this dance of avoidance and then awkwardness, avoidance, and then awkwardness.
She should do a mom talk dance on that.
Like, she should.
They should all like get together and do that dance.
Yes, they should. And I'd be happy to star in it as the therapist. Please let me. I'm in. No, I'm just kidding. I can't dance at all, but.
Well, so we already talked about her showing up at the roller skating party and so on and so forth. But we do find out that Whitney is taking a step down from mom talk. And now we know Jen is leaving, but now we found out that she's not. Really not. And Taylor has her baby, and Dakota is very excited and very supportive. And it ends with Whitney calling Jenna. Now, please fill in any blanks before we wrap up, if there's anything else you want to touch on.
Okay, yes. One thing I wanted to touch on was Zach. There was a little chestnut dropped, and I have it highlighted, where Demi, I'm sorry, it's going to take practice. Demi says he's such a narcissist. He sucks the life out of her, and then she proceeds to tell the story about how Zach's gambling. Zach's family gave he and Jen money for school, and he blew through it gambling. Did you catch that?
That is true. Okay.
So that is true. That is true.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Because one of the girls said that, right? It was kind of a throwaway line. It was to me. Okay.
It was to me, and it was a throwaway line, but your bish catches all the good stuff.
Oh my God, it's so crazy.
Right. And so it's like, and the other thing I did want to say is, like, Jessie, she laughed and she said about Zach that she gave him serial killer vibes.
Yeah,
and compared him to Ted Bundy. I thought that was so hilarious. But I think the most concerning thing is when, and again, this was like a little throwaway thing, but when Jen is talking to Zach in their living room and he looks like he just wants to explode, Jen's talking to him about how mom talk is so important to her, and his response was, I don't care. I don't care. They're not significant. And so my point in saying this is because, I may do an episode about narcissistic personality disorder and how that can cross the bridge into psychopathology. Because what I'm telling you is that is a wildly atrocious response to the mother of your children about something that's important to her.
It's abhorrent. And the things that he texted her that night in Vegas that they all saw, horrible things. I'm done. We're done. I'm like, yeah, that's what you say when you're in a relationship, when you're in your early 20s and you're not married and you don't have kids and you don't know what a relationship is like and you've got no impulse control and you're just a mess. Those are the things that you do when you're young. And that's what they're doing in this marriage. It's like they're playing house and the stakes are so high.
They're so high, and I'm really upset that Jen's not going to be back because I would bet every single dollar that I own that this relationship will crash and burn. And I hope for Jen's sake that she realizes that she deserves better. And so do her children, because the last thing that I'll say is that even though the ladies in their intervention with Jen, they did go a little hard, it was really overwhelming, but Jessie made the most solid point, which is you are teaching your children how to be loved and love other people. And I just thought, snaps, because kids don't learn by what we say. They learn by watching what we do. And when they watch this man treat their mother in a certain way or talk to her in a certain way, that is what is so dangerous for these children. So I just hope that Jen and her children, they are okay, they are safe, they are happy, whatever happens. But any people listening to this, please know that if anything we've said has resonated with you, it is not your fault. You're not alone. And I just send everyone dealing with this a ton of love and support because, Amy, as you and I both discussed, it's very nuanced, it's very complex. And I want anyone listening to this who's been a victim, is a victim, to know that you are loved, you are supported, you are not deserving of any of this treatment.
There you go. Yeah. Amen to that, sister. What an amazing collaboration. I just could talk to you all the live long day, Melissa Reich.
Right.
And I'm so happy that I got to get in the ears of your listeners. So to your listeners, I will say, please check out Drama Darling Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you want to hear any pop culture recaps like Real Housewives, Mormon Wives, some true crime, things like that. And then over on patreon.com/Drama Darling, you can get Monday, Wednesday, Friday recaps over there. And Melissa, will you tell my darlings where they can find you?
Well, of course. And first of all, I just want to point out, please check Amy out. You are so talented. And I always tell my audience, I do. I talk about you and I'm like, I think in Amyisms, like today I was getting ready and I pictured you doing that impression of Martha Stewart, like about beautiful, beautiful daughter.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah. Very, very beautiful.
Amy does impression. She's hilarious. So please go check her out. But yeah, so you can check me out at Your Bish Therapist on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and on YouTube. Yay! Just had a little brain fart. And on YouTube, yes.
It's a lot. It's a lot to do today. I mean, we covered a lot. Thank you so much. We're just delighted that we could do this for you guys. So thanks for listening to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be back together another time. So bye, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bye.